free speech is under attack also in the US and in the EU. Now, throughout the Western world, we see a worrying trend of big governments becoming even bigger and more paternalistic. And the problem is that these paternalistic governments are fighting communities because communities can function as politically strong pressure groups. And one of the reasons why I think identity politics is so prevalent is because it is a form of playing divide and conquer with the people. Now, the thing is that a number of ideological subversions are taking place in these landscapes, and especially when it comes to freedom of speech and freedom of expressions, statists want us to believe that all the freedom of expression we need is the freedom to agree with their agenda and not to disagree with it. Now, speaking of the subversion of the term liberty, you can visit our website, lotuseaters.com, where for £5 a month, you can watch all our premium content, including Symposium 18, where Carl and I are debating classical liberalism. Now, what I'm saying that in this debate, I argue that we should basically resist the subversion of the term liberty, and that the other side is going after the symbolic notion after the symbolic power, the motivating power of the term, and we shouldn't just give it to them. And just as it is important to not identify ourselves with the terms that our political opponents want us to identify with, we should not allow our political opponents to identify in words that they have no business appealing to. And the people who, I'm making the case for the claim that the people who now call themselves liberals have nothing to do with any of the traditional meanings of the term liberty, and we should not, frankly, we should not allow them to do it. And you could see also another debate I had with Carl, called the universal acid, why liberalism is a universal acid, where our discussion continues. And we're talking about the difference between political liberalism and comprehensive liberalism. Now, the thing is that this warring tendency of centralization is seen in the EU's Digital Services Act. And now, as you will see, Twitter is being pulled off what is called a voluntary code of fight against misinformation. Now, I want us to start with this video, and I want you, before we play it, I want to ask you, as we watch it, what do you think of their body language? Let's play this.
So we are in Austin together with Elon Musk. Thank you very much, Elon, for welcoming me.
Thank you. Most welcome.
And of course, we discussed many issues, and I was happy to be able to explain to you the DSA,
yes,
a new regulation in Europe. And I think that now you understand very well. It fits pretty well with what you think we should do on a platform.
No, I think it's exactly aligned with my thinking. I think I very much agree with. It's been a great discussion, and I really think I agree with everything you said. Really, I think we're very much of the same mind, and you know, I think just anything that my companies can do that would be beneficial to Europe, we want to do that. I just want to say.
No, thank you very much. That's again a good example. Then when we see that it could be some differences, especially when we are speaking things so important for our fellow citizens,
yes,
as in life and the digital space, the best is to come and discuss. This is what we did, and I'm happy to see that we are aligned.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Now, what a non-awkward social occasion.
Just love the initial body language of Musk, the gorilla man. Like,
yeah, and he's changing all the time. Yeah, and what a merry company we are here. Now, the thing is, that was 10 months ago. Something happened. This fantastic friendship is going through a rough patch. Let us see why. Now, on the 27th of May, there was an article published in the German Die Welt, and it has the title, EU, Twitter leaves voluntary pact on fighting disinformation. The social media giant owned by Elon Musk has been warned that obligations remain over the removal of fake news. Twitter and other large platforms will face heavier regulations when new EU rules take effect in August. Now, if we just can scroll down a bit, it says here, Twitter has yet to confirm its withdrawal from the code, but the decisions appear to be the latest move by billionaire Elon Musk to loosen the reins after he bought a social media firm last year. Musk cut thousands of jobs to save money, slashing entire departments. I remember some of those departments basically had no reason to exist.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Including those responsible for content moderation. Pursuing a goal of turning Twitter into a digital town square where freedom of speech is prioritized, Musk has rolled back previous anti-misinformation rules and has thrown its verification system into chaos. This is what is being written here. Now, on the 5th of June, let us move to the next link by Euronews. Twitter has chosen confrontation with Brussels over disinformation code of conduct. Okay. And if we scroll down a bit, you can read the article if you want. It says, but even if the code of conduct is voluntary, because it's supposed to be a voluntary code, fighting disinformation will become a legal obligation under the EU's Digital Services Act, DSA, which comes into force on August the 25th this year. If Twitter, there's a Jourova from the EU says, if Twitter wants to operate and make money in the European market, it will have to comply with the Digital Services Act. Twitter's departure will come as no surprise to Brussels, given that Elon Musk has eased moderation of problematic content since completing his takeover of the social media company last November. So, that doesn't seem to be good news. I don't know, but I don't like when people start posing in a virtue signaling manner, and they say, no, we want to safeguard the people, we want to help the people with their information, we want to basically prosecute everyone who does misinformation and problematic content. They speak as if there is no issue with how we define problematic content.
It's good censorship. That's all.
It's a ministry of truth
Censorship
in
for
the
good.
making. Yeah. So from the European side, and this is what is a bit, this is very disconcerting, this is portrayed as EU's fight against big tech and against social media platforms. Now, the thing is that if you think of it, actually it's anything but that, because I'm a political realist, okay? I think basically social stability is always social stability as a balance of powers. Okay. Now, the thing is, when we see this increasing trend of centralization in Western governments, and we see constantly officials from these governments saying that, well, outsource all your decision making and all your thinking to us, and let us say what content is problematic and what you're not allowed to say, what you're not allowed to read, what shouldn't reach you. This seems to me to actually disrupt the people's power, because the people are one of the major centers of power. And if the people are not concerned citizens enough, we have gaps of public attention and huge incentives for government officials to take advantage of the lack of public awareness. And it is not a coincidence that almost every authoritarian and totalitarian regime starts by trying to control the media and information. Now, let's go to this tweet by Thierry Breton, who was the fellow we saw talking to Elon Musk, and both of them had this very, let's say, funny and comfortable body language. He says, Twitter lives EU voluntary code of practice against disinformation, but obligations remain. You can run, but you can't hide. This sounds like ominous a bit. It reminds me of Darth Sidious, I think. And
he's very, very specific and clear about it.
Beyond voluntary commitments, fighting disinformation will be legal obligation under DSA as of August 25. Our teams will be ready for enforcement.
Best response there by the guy below, though. This is an American website. Go away. It's an American world. You just live in it.
By Aristophanes. Yeah. So the thing is, though, that remember what we said in the beginning, that freedom of expression means freedom to agree with their agenda, but not to disagree with it. So they portray a code of conduct as being voluntary, but when people start disagreeing with it, and for instance, when Elon Musk does not think that these rules are good, they're saying we're going to make it legally obligatory for you to adopt these rules. Otherwise, you're going to be penalized.
To be honest, I do prefer this to the old regime, which is like, oh, we'll cooperate with blah, blah, blah. No, this is just naked power, which is far more preferential.
It's more honest.
Because like when the Iranian government banned Twitter, no one's under any illusion as to what's happening there. The Iranian government are a bunch of tyrants. Good. Yeah, the EU wants to do the same thing. Go for it.
I know, but the thing is that it's supposed to be the case. It is supposed to be the case that people in the EU have different, more European or more Western values. So I think that we have plenty of ground to hold them more
European
accountable.
values.
And
What's the problem?
we'll get there in a minute. Okay, so let's move to the next clip, please, to see what is a bit the Digital Services Act. Now, the thing is, I will show you the document for everyone who is interested. It's incredibly legalistic, but, don't be deterred. Let us watch this video.
So watching a slideshow, essentially, of, the act that's being passed is good for good things.
And for those who can't listen, it says protecting fundamental rights and freedom of expression. Fair conditions for all businesses on online platforms. A single set of rules for the whole EU. For a safer and open digital space with European values at the center.
God, I hate European.
You see...
Does European values really mean anything?
Well,
Sincerely, what does that mean?
Well, that's a problem with the whole fight against disinformation, that when you have people who have increasingly more power, they feel that they have the ability to define what are European values.
But also it doesn't make, you've got all these constituent countries with their own sincerely long-held histories and values.
Yeah.
And then we've just declared European values a new thing that they all have.
Yeah.
It's like, no, they can't all have them, or they'd be the same place.
Well, ironically and somehow miraculously, they're always the values that justify those people who are in power maintaining their power.
Yeah.
Just a coincidence. It's just 100% correlation.
The Finnish and the Portuguese, basically the same people with the same values.
Yeah.
No.
Now, the thing is that the whole thing, it's a bit dystopian. Because they portrayed, this uplifting music, people being happy. It has a Stepford Wives era into it. Do you know Stepford Wives?
No, I don't know.
So it was basically a small town where the men decided that they need to have the women, to have some robot women, and robot women would be more loving. And there's a scene in the adaptation where, someone asks, there's a wife asking her husband, can a robot say that I love you? And the response is, yeah, in 57 languages. Okay, so the thing is, it is supposed to protect the fundamental rights and freedom of expression of people in the EU. But again, we mentioned about the problems with freedom of expression. They understand it as freedom to agree with the agenda, not the freedom to disagree. And speaking of fundamental rights, what about the freedom of association? What about the freedom to choose your sources of information? Other things being equal, we are limited beings. It is very unlikely that one side is 100% and the other side is 100% wrong. That is why we need to have a more diversified source of information. That's not the use of the word diversity that we are usually criticizing. So we need more sources of information, and it's good to be able to appeal to them. And frankly, it is very worrying when governments who think that their, let's say, rule is going to be challenged by people finding out about their practices and disagreeing with what they're doing, when they're trying to regulate that, that's disconcerting. Now, if we move to the next link, you will see that this is here the document. Any one of you who is interested, you can have a look.
0 of you to read all of that. Yeah.
Okay. So the thing is, let's go to the next link. And here we have a supporter of this policy, Hendrik Claessens, who, if we show his account, he has sort of a following. He has 71.5 thousand followers, and he's founder of the Pan-European FBPE movement, resistor, dreamer, translator, poet, astronomy, global topics. Okay, and what he says is really weird, and it illustrates a ton of problems with it. Now, if we can see here, can we Yeah. Because I support the new EU social media regulation, I have been getting tons of hate from bots, trolls, extremists, and MAGA fans. There is no better proof that these people have every interest in not fighting hate and lies. Let us therefore wholeheartedly suppose the EU #DSA. Now, you would wait, you would think that on Twitter, when this person wants Twitter to be regulated and presents Twitter as being basically a town square of hatred, you would expect to see some of that hatred on Twitter. If we browse slowly on the replies, we will see basically what's the new rule. There's just a question. Then the other person agrees. Then another person called Alex Hale says, block and report, very effective on climate deniers. We are with you. Victory Europe. I support you, Hendrik. Victory Europe yet again. A badge of honor. We must face down the populists. I don't see any hate.
There are no even disagreeing opinions.
Yeah. And the question is that how is hate to be interpreted? And it's really interesting because if we go on the next link, we will see that what this person says here. I mean the Digital Service Act package that creates a safer digital space where the fundamental rights of users are protected. This includes fighting disinformation, lies, hatred, and threats on social media. So the thing is that this person is making many logical leaps. Now, if we go back on the original tweet, he says, his rationale is, assuming that he got hate, which I don't see, but okay, whatever. He says, people hate me for supporting a policy, therefore they are not interested in fighting lies. I don't see the connection. Sorry, sir, with respect, your emotions are neither identical with truth nor infallible indicators of it. Now, if we are to go forward with the thing, the problem here is that whenever I'm a big believer in talking to people. And I think that there is value in talking to people. And it is not a coincidence, I repeat, when you have governments that are authoritarian and totalitarian in nature, when they try to control information. They do this for a reason. They do this to disrupt the people's ability to communicate, coordinate, and present a united front, which functions as a source of power. I'm not saying that people get things always right, but it's function for, let's say, a stable republic and a stable society to have many centers of power and have a sort of balance of power. So the point is that we have, when we have calls for massive centralization, we have people who want to pose as authorities over what information you should have and what information we should have. And they want to basically have a monopoly on how we think. Now, let's watch the next video by David Thunder.
One of the most disturbing aspects of the Digital Services Act is that it authorizes the European Commission to declare a crisis. And in the event of declaring such a crisis, then they can require companies like Twitter to take action against information that is deemed to pose a threat to public health or security. We've been down this path already. We've just lived through 2 years of public crises and emergencies where governments and social media companies have gone after individuals, have shut down their accounts in the name of protecting the public against harmful or misleading information. Much of that information that was censored, we now know was absolutely on the money concerning the lack of efficacy of population-wide masking, concerning the lab origins of the coronavirus, concerning the efficacy of vaccines, their failure to stop transmission, and many other issues. What can we do about this? The first step is to wake up. The first step is just to realize what's happening and to spread the word, share this video, tweet about this, talk to your friends about this, because people's ability to speak freely on social media may very well be curtailed in the future under the Digital Services Act. Please do consider taking out a paid subscription to my Freedom blog if you'd like to support my work in defense of a free society. Both my YouTube and Substack channels are on the homepage of my Twitter account.
Now, I'm very pleased to announce that I have already interviewed David Thunder, and our interview will be released very soon. We are talking about things such as the new Irish anti-free speech bill. We're talking about citizenship. We're talking about communities. Be sure to tune in. Okay. So one thing is that there's a notion here with, let's say, the emergency. Governments that want to have a monopoly on information, they want to have a monopoly on declaring a state of emergency. And the thing is that we sort of constantly live under emergencies. Emergencies that when emergency becomes the new norm, it seems to no longer be an emergency.
It's kind of like the terrorism threat level.
Yeah.
When it goes up, I mean, just okay. Nothing I can do about it. This is the norm.
Yeah, and there's a question of not destroying from the inside what you're trying to protect from the outside, which is the famous quote by Eisenhower. Now, speaking of emergencies, let's look at the next tweet. We have, who again declares emergency and for what purpose? Anti-LGBTQ plus laws. Know before you go emergency. For the first time, we have Human Rights Campaign account says, for the first time ever, we are declaring a national state of emergency as LGBTQ plus Americans face extremist attempt to roll back our rights. It's more important than ever we have to necessary resources to stay safe no matter where we are. Now,
is it still legal to be gay in America?
How can they declare a state of national emergency if they're
Well, that's my point. I mean, are they about to make it illegal again? Is it going to be gone?
I don't know.
No?
No,
nothing's going to happen.
No. Next tweet. Again, America's largest LGBTQ plus civil rights organization has declared a national state of emergency, citing multiplying threats facing millions. Now, again, how can they declare national state of emergency? Who listens? Who allows them to say and speak as if they represent the state? That's a really interesting question. If we go on the next link, we have a video here which gives some context, because the thing is that when we look at identity politics, we see many minority groups, and the question is, how come do small minority groups have so much power? The question is whether some people give them the power to disrupt society, and whether they actually use them in order to play divide and conquer. Let's look at this video from here.
You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we are doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted, okay?
We're doing the same thing.
And so it's just, you have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities, and we're going to have to force change.
Much capitalism. God, I love the free market. Everyone in charge at the top's a socialist and we'll force it on you.
This is from 2017, and I don't know, but I think that basically a society should not be, is not a business. There is more to society than being a business, and I don't know how he functioned as a CEO, but it's important to maintain a free society and fight for our liberties that are being curtailed. And this idea of forcing behaviors, we sort of see it a lot in the new governments, and they forcefully push forward the ESG agenda on all sorts of issues. Now, one thing to say, because it's important, and there's a difference between two distinct arguments, because you may ask that, well, you didn't say a lot about the Digital Services Act, the specifics of the legislature. The thing is that there is a difference. The point is not that there can be a bad interpretation of the notion of hate, the notion of disinformation, the notion of misinformation, bad diagnosis of intention. Of course there can be, but every institution can be, let's say, misused. But that's not the argument. The argument is a bit different. The thing is, the argument goes like this, that given the current state of society that we live in, and let's say the increased centralization and the forceful pushing forward of an agenda that that the people don't necessarily want, but some of them tolerate, it is overwhelmingly likely that hate will be over-diagnosed. And I mean, even if you accept that hateful speech should be prosecuted, that I personally don't, but even if you did that, the question is that we risk an over-diagnosis of hate, disinformation, and all these bits. There's nothing in the way that current governments in the Western world operates that suggests that they're not going to abuse and exaggerate in diagnosing whatever they present to be the ills. And just last tweet to end on a funny note. If we scroll down a bit, we will see that this is a quote tweet. Now, there was a Nina Turner who said, if someone says they're a woman, not a tough concept. No one said anything about disinformation against that. And the quote tweet is really funny. Rudy says, if someone says they did not have sexual relations with a woman, they did not have sexual relations with that woman. Not a tough concept.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on Victorian manners and etiquette. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.